It's 2023. Financial YouTubers, TikTokers, pretty much everyone in between has talked about most of the really important financial topics out there because there's only so much you can talk about. But one of the topics that I feel gets overlooked the most is what we're going to be talking about today because it recently applied to myself. Today we're going to be talking about the financial impacts of getting married and what it does to your financial journey. Finances are a lot simpler when it's just one person, but when you add an additional person, there are some pros and there are some cons that we need to talk about. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about because finances are the main reason why marriages end. And because of that, they kind of want to stay away from it because it's no fun to talk about it. Weddings are supposed to be the most exciting day of your life, but there are a lot of financial impacts that I wanted to talk about in today's video. I'm going to give my outline for what my plan is for getting married and how our finances are going to go, and kind of give some thoughts on how I think it's the best way to maximize the potential of this opportunity and make it a positive opportunity instead of something that hinders your financial journey. When I think about getting married, I think about four major financial factors. The first is the engagement ring / wedding ring, because if you look on the internet, there are some crazy info on there. Number two is the wedding itself. It's supposed to be the happiest day of your life, so you might as well spend a lot of money on it. We'll talk about it. Number three is joining finances, whether you decide to do it or not, and the shocking data that many people are not actually doing it, especially the younger people like myself. And finally, number four is it's the head in the room that we really don't want to talk about, and that's divorce, and that's the financial impact that it'll have on your journey. So rings have always been something that has become a bigger and bigger deal when it comes to social media, it seems. Everyone wants to have the bigger and better product, and as a result of that, things are getting pretty out of hand when it comes to spending. When you kind of think about how much money should I be spending on an engagement ring, the default that people think of is 2 months' salary. And who's telling you that info? It is the ring companies. It is some propaganda put out by the ring companies to have you spend more than you're able to afford on a ring. This is a ridiculous amount of money, and especially the number that pulls up here, you should spend at least 2 months' salary on the engagement ring. For example, you're making $60,000 a year, you should spend $10,000 on the engagement ring. They don't even care that that's not your take home, that's what your salary is before tax. They just want you to spend as much money as possible. When you look at it, the average is higher than I kind of thought it would be. But the most interesting thing that kind of popped out to me is some of the numbers that go associated with the engagement rings. Obviously, this has nothing to do with how your individual relationship's going, but it's just some statistics that I wanted to bring up. Researchers found that men who spend $2,000 to $4,000 on a ring are 1.3 times more likely to end up divorced than those who spend between $500 and $2,000. So it really doesn't have to do with how big of a ring it is, it has to do with the financial impact because of how important it is going to be on your financial journey, especially if you're putting yourself in a really negative situation by bringing on a lot of debt. It's all based on how much you can afford, and I think the most critical thing is that you're not going into debt to finance it. Half of people proposing to their partners are going into debt to buy an engagement ring. The only thing that I really think is reasonable to take debt out on is buying a house and buying a car if it's at a reasonable interest rate and it's a reasonable car. Buying an engagement ring is not one of those things. When you think of the huge spenders that you're going to have out there, it's going to be a house, it's going to be a car. The engagement ring shouldn't be something that is going to be paid off in 50 installments over the next 5 years. That's just not something you want to do. So when it comes to buying an engagement ring, be sure that it's in your price range and don't try to have the largest ring out there just to keep up with some of the other people you're seeing on social media, because as we know, social media is not real. Number two, let's talk about weddings. Weddings have gotten out of hand, and when you think about the sales pitch that the people are giving you, it makes a lot of sense for why they have gone up in price significantly over the past 10, 20, 30 years. Weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of your life, and as a result of that, they can price gouge the crap out of you. You don't want to underpay on something that's going to be the happiest day of your life, because what if the photographer loses the photos? You want to make sure that they have 5 different backup systems to make sure that you get the pictures from your happy days. You want to make sure that you invite every person that you've ever known because you want them to know that I'm getting married and it's this big, beautiful day, and you want to be the center of attention. This brings up some really difficult things when it comes to finances because weddings have got exponentially more expensive, especially with the pandemic. 2020 made it so that weddings were not able to be had. Were people not getting engaged during that time? No, so you get this buildup of demand, and because supply was so small, you get into 2022, 2023, the price of weddings have gone up significantly because there are just not enough places to hold these weddings, so the prices have been gouged pretty significantly over the past couple years. In 2021, the average wedding was $22,500, which is a ridiculous amount of money, especially when you think about the amount of people that are able to afford $1,000, whether it be a normal emergency. This is a lot of money, and it's really going to set you behind if you're spending this amount of money. I'm not shaming anyone that's spending this amount of money on a wedding. It's just a lot of money, and it's a huge financial decision. The cost of living is rising, but the average American wedding cost fell in 2020 and 2021. That's because people were not able to have these luxurious weddings that they were having in the past. So it dropped down to $19,000, but up in 2021, the average cost stood at $22,500. Huge impact. 28% of couples go into debt to pay for their wedding. Why is this a smaller number than what we talked about when it comes to buying rings? That's likely because families are gonna help out with this thing, and that's kind of the traditional thing with weddings, is that families are gonna help a lot more than the actual ring itself. But still 28% paying for the wedding and going into debt on it for a wedding that costs $22,000. That is a huge amount of debt to go into, and it was pretty surprising when I saw it. The number that really stood out to me was in 2018, the average US couple invited 167 guests to their wedding, with just a ridiculous amount of people. I think if I had a wedding right now, I'd probably invite like 30 people. I just don't know that many people. How do people know these many people that they feel comfortable paying for them to come to their wedding? That's beyond me. Let's go to number 3, which is gonna be merging finances. When I think about getting married, merging finances is probably the most exciting thing to me, because instead of having two people working side by side, they're kind of working on the same goal. Being able to team up together and be able to focus on your goals as one is super exciting to me, and is one of the huge draws about getting married, is that you have this life partner that is on the same page and is following the same goals that you're having. But the number of people that are combining finances is much smaller than I actually thought. I thought it was going to be around 90%, but according to Bankrate, around 43% of married couples have combined their money, according to a survey that was done, and that was much smaller than I expected. And when you get to the Gen Zers of the world like myself, that number is down to like 30%. So why is this? People like the independent feeling of keeping their finances separate, but I'm gonna make the case for why I think that combining finances is super beneficial. Yes, you have some of the negative things about your debt is now my debt. It's the idea that you're able to build wealth with a bigger shovel than you were previously. Instead of having two people kind of working on their own towards a similar goal, it makes it a lot easier because you can simplify your finances because they're connected. Instead of having to Venmo your partner for rent every month, it's just coming out of the same account. Is it perfect for every situation? Absolutely not. But I think it's interesting that the amount of people that are combining their finances is going down even more than there was in the past. Most of my friends that have gotten married in recent years are not combining finances, and that's kind of a head scratcher to me. And I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are about combining finances in the comment section down below. So what are the biggest things to consider when you're looking at combining your finances, or maybe not? The first is make sure that you're on the same page with financial goals. Even if you're not combining finances, making sure that you're on the same page of what we're saving for is super important. Right now, my partner and I are saving for a house, and we are going to be combining finances, which I think is fantastic. But even still, we've been on the same page about what we're saving for. So while we haven't combined finances in the past year, we've still been able to save towards this goal. And I think that's really critical to have these discussions about finances, because the number one reason for divorce is finances, and making sure that you're talking about them and not just pushing them into the closet, I think is a huge factor in protecting a marriage. So number 2, let's talk about plans for paying off debt and avoiding debt in the future. You want to make sure that you're kind of on the same page about where our debt is right now, what our plan for paying off that debt is, and how we're going to avoid accruing debt in the future. Debt is one of the huge hindrances when it comes to building wealth, and if you have debt right now, that's okay, but we're going to try to avoid going into more debt in the future, and we're going to try to pay it off as soon as possible, as realistically as possible. I don't want you cutting out all of the things that you like in life just to pay off some debt. Not realistic, but I think it's important to be on the same page with debt, same with your financial goals. And then number 3 is being on the same page about spending limits. Depending on every couple, there's gonna be a different number when it comes to how much money you have to spend to ask your partner for approval. Some people I've heard it be $100, some people I've heard $500, but you wanna make sure that you're avoiding resentment by having one partner going out and spending $1,000 and thinking, oh, well, that's my money too, why are you spending it like that? The whole take home from this section is that communication is critical in pretty much every aspect of a relationship, and especially when it comes to finances that are one of the huge reasons why divorces happen. Make sure that you're communicating about finances and talk about it earlier rather than later. So studies have found that couples that merge finances are on average happier. Why do I think that is? The thing that I think is the most critical is that it simplifies your life. It makes it so that my money is your money, but it needs communication to go along with it. I think that combining finances forces you to have this conversation about what your plans are, whereas keeping them separate, you can kind of avoid some of the bodies in the closet of, oh, I have $50,000 of student loan debt. Let's just not talk about that and just kind of ignore it. Whereas if your $50,000 of student loan debt is combining with mine, we're gonna have to have a conversation about it, and conversations lead to action instead of just pushing it off to the future and letting those interest rates really climb. So I think that's one of the big reasons why people who combine finances are on average happier, but I'm curious what you have to say about it in the comment section down below. And finally, let's talk about divorce, because almost 50% of all marriages end in divorce. And when you look at the numbers of it, it's pretty interesting to see how which number marriage you're on really influences your divorce rate. So you have researchers estimate that 41% of all first marriages end in divorce. When you go up to the second marriage, it's 60%, and then it goes up to 73% after third marriages. So the more times you're married, the more likely you are to get divorced, and the cost of divorce is significant. So we had the cost of the wedding being around, I think it was $22,000 on average. Well, the average cost of divorce in the United States is around $15,000 per person. So it's more expensive to get divorced than it is to get married, because you have to untangle all of the complicated things that you've pushed together after you've gotten married. And so this is a huge detractor of building wealth. You're getting to your years where you're getting the highest amount of income and you're going to be able to build wealth. And this is a huge hindrance, because you're going to have to take some steps back, kind of separate what you had going on, and then you have to start all over. So divorce is a huge part when it talks about finances. No one wants to talk about divorce, but it is a huge factor. And I think that communication is the critical part in all of this. So I think this is the biggest financial decision that the rest of the YouTube community does not really talk about. And I wanted to discuss because I did get engaged while I was in Australia, which is why I have not made videos in the past 2 weeks. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it and what you think the most important parts about combining versus not combining your finances are in the comment section down below. My name is Andy. If you made it this far, I'd really appreciate it if that like and subscribe button, as it would help my channel out a lot, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.